Serious, frequent travelers of Reddit, what's something you saw when traveling that was so scary you never went back somewhere? Throughout high school, I and some friends had these trips to the South Texas desert near the border. We would camp out in the wilderness and shoot guns or build a bonfire. We graduated in 2004. Our last trip was in 2005, and we had a really scary experience. We had a campfire going at night. For those that don't know, deserts actually get cold at night due to lack of humidity. So we had a campfire going, and 3 guys came out of the darkness into the light of the campfire. No hello. No what's up. In very basic English, the first guy says, "You come with us." This was not a request. We politely declined, and then another guy said something in Spanish and was extremely angry. The first guy said to come with him again. We refused, and he stepped forward. My friend panicked and pulled his shotgun out. Screamed that we were not going anywhere. The English-speaking guy simply said, Okay. Stay." As he backed up. They left, and we quickly put out the fire. I made sure everyone grabbed their wallets and phones, old Razor flip phones. We got the hell out of there and sprinted towards the car. As we were driving away, we saw 3 sets of headlights driving over the flats. We killed the car's lights and drove in darkness on the road until we lost sight of them. We drove to a sheriff's office to report what had happened. We were told that if our story was true, it is a real good thing we did not go with them. When my younger brother was in college, he took a cab ride in a border town in Texas. The driver crossed the border, which is fine, but veered off into side streets. Only when my brother and his friends badgered him did he seem to get back on the main road. Then veered off onto a dirt road. My brother, who was 6 feet 6 inches, and his friends told him to stop, to turn around. The man would not. Kept saying he knew a better part or club than the one they wanted to go to. My brother's friend threatened the guy. Finally, he pulled over and they got out. Heard the next day about a gang that would bring in Americans and kill them and collects their teeth and bones. There was a detective there looking for missing college guys. That story absolutely terrified me to hear. One afternoon when my dad was in college, he was at a bus stop with his friends and cousin when he noticed a pretty girl his age beside them, so he gathered the courage to approach her. He says that just as he was about to talk to her, a van came skidding and stopped in front of them. The side door opened, and 3 men snatched the girl into the car. My dad says it all happened so fast that the girl's scream was cut short by the door getting closed and the van speeding away. Around a dozen people saw what happened, but it was so fast and shocking that it took around half a minute before anyone broke the silence. This was in Manila's University Belt and not at all somewhere secluded, and yet nothing came out of the investigation. The police never even found out who she was. My dad says he still dreams about it and how the girl's books fell by his feet. My sister, my mom, and I were almost trafficked. We are originally from the Balkans, living in Germany. When my parents divorced, my mom took us for a holiday back home. The bus drive was 30+ hours. We almost arrived, and my uncle was supposed to pick us up at the bus station. But we did not arrive. It was around 11 p.m., and the bus driver said we had a flat tire in the middle of nowhere. There were 3 other women left on the bus. They started crying, since they told us some nice taxis were waiting for us on the street to bring us to our homes. Which, in retrospect, was ridiculous, since we all lived in different cities. However, my mom and sister had already got into the taxi, bags in the trunk. Then the women started screaming and crying, trying to call their husbands. Luckily one husband was not living far away, so he came with his family, and the bus driver was scared, and the taxis left. Long story short, we later found out that many women and girls went missing the last couple of months due to human trafficking. When I went to Thailand, I did extensive research to see if I could see elephants in an ethical way. I found one single sanctuary that didn't have anything to hide, while all the others were at least suspicious in some details or outright abusive. The sad part is that now most Westerners know that riding elephants is really bad, so even the abusive elephant camps jumped on the no-riding bandwagon, but they mistreat the animals in 1,000 other ways. Also, they all have similar names, so one must be absolutely sure of which one you are talking about. Elephant Nature Park by Lake Shire is the only one that I can guarantee upon. We went to the Dominican Republic for our honeymoon. One day we decided to take a day trip that the resort was offering. The trip included sightseeing by bus, lunch, a trip to a waterfall, and ended with a horseback ride. There were about 7 of us in the group. At the end of the day, we were on our way back to the stables, and we ventured underneath a bridge. A dude appeared out of the dense bushes cussing at us and swinging a machete. One of the horses dumped its rider, and the rest of us took off while the tour guide negotiated with the man. We all made it back to the bus safely but wide-eyed. Olney, Illinois. My car windows, left rear and rear, were shot out as I was traveling south and approaching a railroad overpass. Bullet entered through the left rear window and exited out the rear window. I continued south until I was able to pull into a convenience store to examine the damage and to call the local police. The shot came from the railroad overpass as I approached it. The shooter was up and to my left on the overpass. The bullet entered the left rear side window just behind my headrest. My car was a 4-door sedan. If I had been going just a tiny bit slower, the bullet would likely have taken me out. When I heard the glass breaking, I looked at my rearview mirror and saw all of the defroster wires in the back window were gone, and so was the window. I still had over 100 miles to go to where I was driving to, and it was in the dead of winter. I had to blast the heater all the way, but it was still a cold ride. My adrenal glands were going strong, and I was completely and naturally wired from that moment on. When the police arrived, they looked at my shot-out windows and said, this hasn't happened for a couple of months now. So it must be a somewhat regular thing in Olney, Illinois, for the cop to be so blasé about it. I will never go back to that place. I went to an ayahuasca retreat in Peru. The retreat itself was amazing, and I would recommend it to every living person. It was held pretty deep in the Amazon, and in order to get there, you had to either pay for a group bus or take a small motorbike taxi. No one is really willing to drive that far otherwise. After the retreat was over, I had a couple of days to stay and relax before returning to the States. The girl that I bunked with had some time as well, and we decided to go into Tarapoto, the nearest town, and just adventure around a while. We shopped and ate and took a tour through a chocolate factory. She stayed in a hotel in town to catch her early morning flight the next morning, so I took a motorbike taxi back to the jungle alone. About halfway down the road, the driver stopped, and a man holding an AR came up the cab and started asking me questions about where I was going and what I was doing, etc. I was completely alone with the driver, who stopped for this guy and the guy with a really big gun in the middle of the Amazon. I was beyond terrified. The whole ordeal lasted less than 5 minutes and ended with me paying the gun guy a toll of 10 sols, I think less than $8, not completely sure on the conversion. The driver insisted I had to do this, so I did, and we thankfully drove away. A few miles later, the driver stopped again, and I almost had a heart attack. He insisted he had something to show me and that I should get out of the cab, so I did. It might have been stupid, and I still don't know what the right thing to do was. He took me to the edge of the road where there was a cliff, and below was the spot where a smaller river smashes violently and spectacularly into the face of the Amazon River. It was among the most beautiful and fantastic things I saw in Peru. We stood in silence and watched the rivers merging for a while before he safely delivered me back to the retreat. It was a scary ride, but man, what a story. This happened in Puerto Rico back in 2003. I would often take long drives to random and secluded or closed beaches at night to study in peace. One night while I was out studying, I just happened to glance at my rearview mirror and saw that an illegal firearms deal was taking place right behind me. Apparently, they weren't concerned about the presence of a witness, which I found to be a huge red flag. Without turning on my headlights, I crept out of that spot and drove off. No one followed me. Definitely ranks in my top 10 creepiest encounters. I once attended a work training event at a nice hotel in Dallas. For some backstory, I was a 20-year-old girl. During some downtime in the evening, I decided to walk across the street to a drugstore and purchase some snacks and water. The hotel sold a single water bottle for $7, so I wasn't having that. As I got to the drugstore, there were 4 or 5 men in a car, and they were yelling strange things at me. It scared me and made me feel a bit uneasy, but I went inside and stayed inside the drugstore for a bit longer to wait them out. I decided to go back to the hotel after a while, so I walked outside, and they were still there, waiting for me. At this point, I was very scared, and these guys were all yelling things at me. I ran across the street even though the crosswalk wasn't telling me I could go. I ended up making it. I went up to my room, paranoid that they would be able to see what floor the elevator went to. After a while inside my room, I stupidly figured they were gone, as I didn't see them follow me into the hotel. I assumed I was being paranoid about the whole thing, so I went downstairs to smoke a cigarette by the fountain at the hotel. At this point, the smoking age was still 18 in both my state and Texas. After I got down there and smoked for a bit, I truly realized my mistake. The men were there in the same car. They were yelling at me. One of them was speaking with a valet man and looking at me. I immediately called my mom. She was yelling at me and scared for me. Then I got off the phone with her to call one of the women who were in training with me. Toward the end of the phone call with the woman I was training with, a man approached me from the group, saying how beautiful I was, and then walked away and watched me with a group of men. The hotel employee was nearby, and I kept looking at him, showing that I was scared and uncomfortable, but he had no response. I thought to myself that maybe these men were also staying in the hotel, so that could have been why they were there. But soon after the call, the woman came and found me and stayed with me. She was older than me and seemed very much like she could be my mother, so she stared them down with the most mama bear look I've ever seen, and they ended up leaving soon after. At that point, I realized they had never been staying at that hotel, and those men were definitely 100% going to do something to me if she wasn't there. The next day I spoke to some of the other women in my training class, and one of them was literally drugged by a man from the hotel. She had completely blacked out and woke up with her face down on a table outside with no memory of it. My husband and I live in Texas. He likes casinos, so once a year, we drive up to Oklahoma to go to a casino. I'm perfectly content watching our daughters in the hotel while he goes and mildly gambles for a few hours. Then he watches them while I go and get a massage the next day. About 3 months ago, we packed up for our annual trip and headed to Oklahoma. We made reservations online through a booking website. But when we got to the hotel, they denied our reservation, saying it never existed. We drive to numerous hotels in the area. All are booked. Apparently, there was the Redneck Truck Festival that same weekend. It is 11 p.m. at this point. The kids are sleeping in the back, and we are desperately trying to find a hotel. We end up in the middle of nowhere, Oklahoma, and stumble upon a motel. It is sketchy, but the girls need to get out of the car and sleep in a proper bed. We decide to try and get a room, then leave first thing in the morning and head home, 5 hours away. My husband goes into the lobby and successfully gets a room. I have no idea which town we are in. It felt like I was in a horror movie. The atmosphere is just creepy, no other buildings around except this motel. No cars in the parking lot except ours and a few others. We start unloading the car and get the girls inside and tucked in. I told my husband I left my purse in the car and went out to get it. I see the person that checked us and smoking a cigarette by the car. I say hello, and he approaches me. You know it's dangerous out here for a young lady like yourself. The man looks like he is in his 30s and looks dirty. I give a nervous laugh and say, yeah, but my husband is inside so I'm okay. He proceeded to walk closer to me and said my kids were cute. Now I'm worried because he never saw my kids. They were sleeping in the car, so at this point, I can only assume he saw us bring them into the room, which is odd because our room was nowhere close to the lobby. I understand he was smoking, but he could have just walked out of the lobby and smoked by the door. It is around 11 p.m., so I doubt any guests are arriving, so your smoke isn't going to bother anyone. Instead, he walked around to the back, where we were to smoke. He then asked me to walk with him to the lobby so he could give me another keycard for the room. Apparently, he only gave my husband one instead of two. I said no, we were fine with one, and ran inside. I told my husband what happened, and we locked the door with the extra lock, you know, the one that has the chain, so that way if someone who had a keycard tried to get in, they couldn't because of the chain lock. We woke up at 6 a.m. and left. To this day, I still have no idea what town that was, but we aren't going back to Oklahoma for a while. Went camping with buddies in East Texas. There was a national forest campsite, but when we got there, it had apparently been abandoned. Turns out the campsite had been closed for years, but they'd never updated the website. There were holes in the roof of the bathroom, etc. We were there anyway, so camped. But then, at night heard people shooting guns nearby with people yelling and flashlights in the woods. We got out of there quickly. Thailand Pai. When I was dating with my girlfriend, we went there. Pai is a sort of out in the nowhere and popular with hippie hipster tourist spot. They also shot some famous Asian movies in this village, so although it's out in nowhere, it was still quite popular. The first thing we noticed was how many stray dogs there were. It was not normal, about 20 dogs wherever you go, and they just walk into restaurants to beg for food, etc. They were all super friendly and chill. When we went there was this huge reggae event. We went there, and it lasted till 2 a.m. or so. You had to catch the shuttle bus to get back into the village since it was far out in the fields. When we were back in the village, we couldn't find where we parked our scooter. It was scary to search for your bike in the middle of the night with many dogs following us and just watching us. When we finally found the bike and drove back to our resort, something strange happened. We saw a lady in the middle of the road at 3 or 4 a.m., at this point, dressed in a long black dress and long black hair in the middle of the road. We had to pass, to get to the resort. She was flailing her arms around but didn't move her feet or move at all, and there were 30 or so dogs in a circle around her barking like crazy, but none of them went close to the lady. I thought I saw things, but my girlfriend saw it too, and I told her to keep driving and not stop. The resort was nearby, so we wanted to warn them about it, and maybe someone needed help. But there was nobody to be seen for some reason. The barking also stopped, and we decided to get to our room and sleep. Well, nope. Over the night, we heard someone knocking on our door and window every now and then. Heard the dogs in the distance again, out of the gate, and it continued. The next day we decided to get out of this town, but every single bus was full due to this reggae event. I decided to pay a driver who approached us for a private drive for 4 times the price, but we just said yes, get us out of here. To this day, we still don't know what it was about and felt so bad if it was really a lady who was just crazy and needed help, but every alarm went off, and I think it was a good call to keep driving, I hope.